So, so beautiful to be together with you all. Beginning as usual with a question that comes in advance, and then we'll open it up to any questions that anyone here has. Why do people not listen? I usually try to take questions that are more about me and my path, but all of the questions tonight are all focused on what other people are doing. So we seem to be in that space tonight. So we'll talk about why people don't listen. So there's a lot of reasons that people don't actually listen to what we're saying. From the very deep to the more shallow. On a deep level, it's really kind of obvious. People don't want to hear what we are saying. It's very rare that people don't listen when we say, I love you. It's very rare that you have to say, listen to me for God's sakes, I love you. Listen to me for God's sakes, you're the best thing in the world. Why don't you listen to me? It's usually, why don't you listen to me tell you about either what I need from you, which presumably I'm not getting, which is why I need you to listen, or what you're doing that isn't what I want you to be doing. And if you just would listen, then you would change. And the truth is that it gets really tiring for people to constantly feel like they are not doing things right. It's one thing when it's every once in a while. But if you're in a situation where you feel like someone is not listening, and what they're not listening to is one of those two categories, then chances are you've been trying to say it a lot for a long time, which is why you're so frustrated that they don't listen, to the point where you'd send in a question about it, meaning I've been trying to criticize this person and get them to change for so long, but they won't listen. Well, it's a rare person. They do exist. And ultimately, it's actually a space that we all should work to get to, in which when someone is criticizing us, we actually are able to really hear them. We may not always believe it. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to internalize everyone's projections on us, but at least we're able to hear it deeply and assess it without any sense of defense mechanism or any sense of denial or reaction, neither defensive nor offensive. But that's very rare, because for most of us, when someone's criticizing, it feels like they're on the offensive, and so we come on the defensive. And we don't listen, because we don't want to hear it. It's a lot easier to ignore it, push it away, roll your eyes, look at the clock, do all sorts of things that make the person know, I'm not listening. Because to really hear that, let's just assume for a minute that whatever you're telling them is correct, that it's not your projection. Just for a brief moment, let's assume that you actually are saying something that is objectively true and that really is in their best interest to change, because they would be actually much better if they listened. Well, that's going to touch people in a very difficult space, because what it means is who you are right now, the way you are right now, is not right. Nobody wants to hear that. We're hard enough on ourselves. Most of us spend most of the time berating ourselves in our own mind, telling us that what we did was wrong or stupid or embarrassing. The last thing we need is to hear it from another person also. So we don't listen. Now there's another reason that people don't listen, which is just the superficial level of what's happening today with people just being distracted. I mean, even if it's not you telling them something that's wrong with them or something you need, but just trying to have a deep conversation about anything. In general, people have stopped listening. If you can't get it out in 30 seconds with captions, people can't hear you. They're scrolling their phones while you talk. I mean, how many times do you have a conversation with someone who's literally, it kind of blows my mind actually, because it wasn't very long ago. I mean, I'm 51, so to some people that's really old. To me, it doesn't feel very old at all. There was a time not that long ago in my life, before smartphones existed, but where if I had something in my hand that I was looking at and playing with, whatever it might have been, even if all I was doing was fidgeting with it while someone was talking to me, that some adult would say to me, "Put that down, young lady. That is rude. Look at someone when they talk to you." You would never have dreamed. I mean, could you imagine, for days prior to smartphones, could you imagine someone's talking to you and you pull out a book? I mean, literally, you just open up a book right in front of somebody's face, put on your glasses and start reading. Right? And could anybody imagine ever doing that? Somebody's talking, you open the newspaper, right? And yet, somehow, with the phone, we've got this collective agreement that that's okay to do. But it's the same thing. So one reason people don't listen may very simply be they're addicted to distraction. And the solution for that is not to get frustrated or angry, because they're not purposely doing it. They're as much a victim of it as you feel victimized by them not listening. And the way around that is simply to say to them, when would be a good time to have a conversation with you? Okay, clearly I see you're busy right now. No problem. It's not a rush. When would be the right time to come back and talk to you? Because what that does is it points out that you recognize that they're doing something else, that that's not conducive to a conversation, but that you're not going to be the one to say when is the right time to have it. Maybe they're doing something important. Maybe their stocks are all crashing right as you're trying to talk to them. Who knows? But get from them a time that's the right time to have a conversation. It'll make them understand that what you want is something different than what they're currently doing. And I can't imagine anyone saying there is no good time. Maybe they'll say in an hour, in half an hour, how about tonight, how about tomorrow morning? And then have your conversation. But I think that we all have to essentially come to terms with the fact that we now have these sources of distraction. And we can't wish them away, but we have to nonetheless not concede to live our lives in a way where we never have deep conversations, where we never look in each other's eyes. And depending on your relationship with that person, just navigate what's the right way. If it's someone you're in a family with, a spouse, a child, set some parameters. No phones at the table. No phones between this time and this time. It's family time. Whatever it may be. But just set some parameters to ensure that people actually can listen if they want to. But the last part, since as I said, for me, satsang is about us, not others. The last part to me that's the most important is when you feel like someone is not listening and you're so upset about it that it drives you to send in a question for online satsang about it, you're suffering. And that's not fun. And the question you need to ask yourself is, why have I put the end of my suffering in someone else's hands? I've determined in my mind that I am suffering and what I need in order to end suffering. But I've determined it in such a way that the end of my suffering lies in someone else's control. And that is about the most precarious thing you can do. Because no one is under our control. And if that which is most precious in my life, my joy, my peace, my freedom, my end of suffering, is in the hands of someone else, or anything else that I have no control over, the weather, earthquakes, whatever you put your life, whatever hands you put that in, or whatever altar you offer that up to, it ideally should be something in your hands. Otherwise we stay slaves. We stay prisoners to someone else's moods, to their actions. I mean, what if someone says, I can hear you and I don't want to listen? I mean, imagine they put down the phone, they're staring in your eyes, you say your piece, and they say, I hear you. I'm not listening. Well, there you are, super stuck, because you've got nowhere to go then. You've decided that what you want is them to listen. They have told you they have no interest in listening. Which is pretty much the exact same thing when someone ignores you for the 15th time when you're trying to tell them the same thing. They seriously are energetically holding up a sign that says, I'm not listening. It's like kids who go, right? They're there in front of you. If they just would take their fingers out of their ears and stop going, blah, 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 they could hear you. But kids do that when they don't want to listen. And when, as adults, someone rolls their eyes, looks at something else, looks away, interrupts, does all of the things that people do that make us feel not heard. It's essentially them going, I know you're talking. I'm not listening. And the question for us then becomes, okay, why am I now going to offer them my peace, my joy, my freedom? Why am I committed to suffering based on their inability or unwillingness to listen to how I think they could really improve their lives, or how they could do what I want them to do in a better way? Our goal is freedom. And these sorts of things just make us more and more stuck. Because then I need you to do something in a certain way for me to feel happy, for me to feel peaceful. Because the other way these things go is they say, I am listening. Right? We say, listen, I am listening. But we still don't feel heard because there's something energetic. But they insist they're listening. Again, you're stuck. You need something, you want something that you're not getting. And you've put your freedom to be free of suffering, in the hands of someone else's habits or ways. And spirituality is all about ending suffering and gaining freedom. Which means I have to unhook my peace and my joy from other people's actions, other people's words, other people's way of living, other people's way of treating me. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons people don't listen, but more important and more interesting than that is not why don't they listen, but why can't I be in peace even though I don't feel like they're listening? Why can't I be happy even though they're not listening the way I want them to? That's the interesting question. Because that's the question that actually takes us somewhere. And of course, that then becomes about each of our own psyches and what we think we need. But what spirituality gives us through our practices of insight, of introspection, of contemplation, of reading spiritual books and scriptures and works, listening to the words of saints and gurus and wise ones, and doing our own internal practices, where we get is a place that says, I don't need to run my life based on these trigger points on my psyche. Right? And we've all got trigger points. Someone pushes this button, it triggers me in this way. And we have different trigger points. Put 10 people in a room, somebody says something. One or two of them may walk away feeling like that was the rudest thing in the world. The other 8 or 9 have no idea that anything even happened. It wasn't their trigger point. So spirituality is that which enables us to get free from our own trigger points simply by noticing them. Okay, so maybe I grew up feeling not listened to. Maybe I had really vibrant and kind of dominating older siblings or younger siblings who kind of took all of mom and dad's attention, and I never really felt listened to. And so that's a little trigger point in my psyche. Okay, Beautiful. Welcome to the human race. We all have trigger points. But now I don't need to ruin my peace, my joy, my freedom, or my relationships because I've got this trigger point. And so through our practice of meditation, of yoga, introspection, we learn to see what they are and then to become free of them, just to notice them. Oh yeah, there's my trigger point, okay. I don't have to get upset about it. I see it over there. I recognize it. But my heart is still open. I'm still in peace. And that's the way that we deal with this. Because that's the only path that matters, not why can't I get someone else to do what I want. That question will take your entire life. And you still won't solve it. At the end of your life, you'll realize, oh, I guess I've got to come back next life to really teach them. They still haven't learned. So don't get stuck on that particular treadmill. Questions? Yes, here in front.
My question is more to do about kind of setting yourself with spiritual expectations and then perhaps not fulfilling them in a way that you want to or hope you want to. This is my first time coming and staying in an ashram for a few days and going through a intensive experience of meditation and yoga and spirituality. And I kind of chose to do this in response to struggling through the last couple of months of connecting with people and finding my path professionally and just, finding more about what I want to do and love. So I think I came here hoping that I would feel more sure of myself. I'd connect with parts of myself, my consciousness, my psyche, that would allow me to come back with more knowledge of how to go on to the next stage. But there is a worry that I won't reach that level of spiritual awakening. And I know it does take time and practice, but I thought if you had any advice with how to kind of deal with that internal anxiety of not being able to be spiritually fulfilled.
Sure. Let's go band kar diya. So you come to a spiritual retreat. You come to a meditation retreat and you figure, all right, I've got 72 hours to get enlightened. Ready, set, go. We laugh, but it's really common. It's really common. I'm going to go off to a retreat and I'm going to have this experience that's going to make me awake, enlightened. First of all, what you have to realize is spirituality just takes you back to who you are. You're not going anywhere. All of these expectations have to do with where I think I'm going. Spirituality is simply showing you who you really are. Enlightenment, awakening, whatever words you use, is simply full awareness of the fullness of yourself. It's not about what you can do. It's not about certain powers. It's not about certain experiences. There's not a checklist of things that you have to do and then you're enlightened, or here's how to know if you're enlightened if you've got 3 out of the following 5 items. It's showing you who you are. Now, you come here after a difficult time, after challenges. Instead of holding a goal of enlightenment, which sounds like it's something very different than what I am right now. Enlightenment seems like it's a whole other ballgame. Instead of that, why not just make a request to the universe that I'm going to be able to see things in a different way? That I'm going to see myself, understand myself, connect with myself in a whole new way. Because ultimately, whatever you have here comes home with you. It's not, oh, I got enlightened in Rishikesh and then that's it. I'm done. It's a practice that stays with you. While you're here, use this time instead of thinking about where you're going. Because grace is there. Light is there. That which you're looking for is there. God is there. It's all there. But our own blinders are that which keep us from it. So focus yourself while you're here on how can I remove my blinders? Let that be your focus. How can I remove that which is keeping me stuck? Don't worry about what you're going to get. Don't worry about what's going to happen to you inside. That'll be automatic. You remove what's blocking it, and it'll automatically come. Use these days to look at internal anger, grudges, pain, regret, unfulfilled expectations, disappointment. Look at all of those and let go of them one by one into the sacred fire, into the waters of Mother Ganga. If you can let go of those, that's what keeps you from actually living in the joy and the peace and the light that you're looking for. It's not that we need to bring it in from outside somewhere. It's that we simply need to remove our internal blocks. For me, the way that I always think about this is, if you have a heart attack, what causes a heart attack? It's not that blood stops flowing. It's that your blood vessel is so stuck, so full of junk. Call it plaque, right? The stuff that builds up on your blood vessels, cholesterol and whatnot. Blood is there, but your blood vessel gets so clogged that the blood can't flow and you have a heart attack. Spiritually, the same thing happens. Grace is there. The light is there. The divine is there. But we are so clogged up inside by our own ways of looking at things. My life is ruined. This was a waste. I was betrayed. This wasn't fair. I got cheated. I got harmed. This wasn't fair. everything's lost. I'll never be able to do this or be this. We've got all these stories. If only this hadn't happened, or if only this had happened, if only I had done this. We're so clogged full of that there's no room for grace and light to flow. So use your time here to let go of that. Whatever stories you're telling yourself in your mind. We all have stories about why we are the way we are. Why we're not enlightened. What's wrong in our lives. What we're angry about. What pain we've been through. What grudges we have. What expectations should have been fulfilled but aren't. And those stories kill us. They define our entire lives and kill us. So let this be a letting go of your story. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. I know it hurts. Sit on the banks of Mother Ganga. Offer her what happened. Offer her the whole story. And let her take it. Because that's your key. Otherwise, we're just taking light and wisdom and whatnot and trying to stick it on top of this being of light, which is simply shrouded in ignorance. It's like that great story that I love of the temple in Thailand or Cambodia that had a beautiful golden Buddha. And when the invaders came, the monks of the temple of the golden Buddha knew that the invaders were coming, they were destroying everything, they were looting everything. And so they covered up the golden Buddha with clay so that it would seem worthless. And the good news was the Buddha survived. The bad news was the monks didn't. And so for many, 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 many years, it was the temple of the clay Buddha. Like people just thought the Buddha was clay in this temple. And one day the monks of the temple of the clay Buddha are cleaning the Buddha. And they see a little shiny light in it. And they start to clean a little more, and there's a crack, and from the crack something is glistening. And so ever so slowly and carefully, they see what it is, and they discover there's gold inside. And they re-unearth the golden Buddha. And what I love about that story is it's a beautiful metaphor for us. We are golden on the inside. We are light on the inside. We are conscious on the inside. We are divine on the inside. But we're covered up with clay, ignorance, ego, stories, regrets, grudges, all of this stuff. But then what we do is we go out looking for gold. We look to try to coat the clay with gold. We're going to make this Buddha gold. And so we go out looking for clay looking for gold. To us, what that means is I'm going to go out and I'm going to somehow through this course or this job or that job or this relationship or whatever may be my path, I'm going to find divinity, beauty, light, consciousness. But as long as you're covered with that clay, all you're doing is sticking stuff on top of the clay. It doesn't work. But that's the bad news. But the good news is that actually that which you're looking for, that light, that perfection, that purity, that love, that truth, all of that is actually who you are. But it's just gotten covered up. So the goal is to remove the clay. So while you're here, do that. It's a perfect place. Perfect place. As you sit in yagna in the morning or the evening or both, just as you offer the yahuti, offer every bit of that clay, every story, every grudge, every unfulfilled expectation, everything that is defining you. Offer it into the fire. When you sit on the banks of Mother Ganga, just keep taking her water in your hands, and into that water, offer the anger, offer the grudge, offer it all. Then offer the water back to Mother Ganga. And what you'll find is as you clear these things, that light starts to shine. But it's not a light of, I got something. It's a light of, I'm here. I see myself. I've unearthed myself. You don't need to be changed. You don't need to be different. You just need to see yourself. So we need to unearth her. She's been buried under pain and struggles and identification and stories around the pain and struggles. So we just have to unearth her. Okay? Good. Other questions? Yes.
My question is how to stay committed towards your goal. For instance, the moment you set your goal that I want to wake up at 5 a.m., the other day the brain gives you many reasons why you want to stay asleep or wants to stay or don't want to wake up early. So how to defeat your brain and how to stay committed towards your goal.
Great. So the brain works almost all of the time, sadly, on what you could call autopilot. Okay? We've got two different types of brain, more than that, but for the sake of this discussion, we'll call it two. We'll call it conscious and unconscious. Okay? And we'll lump subconscious in with unconscious. So we've got conscious mind and everything else. Most of us spend a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of our life in actually our conscious mind. Most of us are running on autopilot almost all the time. It's why we do things that later we're like, I cannot believe I did that. Who was that? We say things that later we think, who was that? Why did I say that? Because we weren't conscious. Because we're just operating habitually. Now, what that means is that in order to change it, I have to first become conscious. So being conscious is the absolute most powerful weapon you have against the autopilotness of your brain. Because if you are really conscious, let's say that I have a smoking addiction and I decide I'm going to quit smoking. But I don't even realize I'm smoking till I'm more than halfway through a cigarette. Because I've been addicted for so long that I literally just pull them out of the pack and light them up totally unconsciously. Well, even without anything else, if I simply became conscious, then I would know the moment my hand goes out to reach to grab a pack of cigarettes. Long before I found myself halfway through it, I would be present. Oh, there's my hand. Wait, I don't want to do that. I'm conscious, I'm aware. Because when you're conscious, you've got full control over your hands, your legs, your tongue, both what you eat and what you speak. We only do things with our arms and our legs and our tongues when we are not conscious, that we end up not wanting to do or regretting that we did, because they're habits. If we're conscious, we have full and complete control. There's nothing that you can't do. I mean, you may not be able to, do backflips on a balance beam, but within reason, there's nothing that you cannot do with these hands, these legs, this mouth. When you're conscious about it, you can say what you want, not say what you don't want, eat what you want, not eat what you don't want, do what you want with your hands, not do what you don't want, go where you want, not go where you don't want with your legs. Because we're conscious. But most of us function on just such autopilot that we are slaves to the habits. My favorite story about this is the friend of a very beautiful, no longer in his body, but was a very, very beautiful spiritual teacher. And he would tell the story of his friend who, every day when the friend went to work, he got off the bus to his work right in front of this pastry shop. And he would go into the pastry shop and buy pastries before he went to work. And then he decides he's going to stop eating sugar, so no more pastries. But every day, nonetheless, he still finds himself sitting down to his desk with a bag full of pastries. And he cannot figure out how this is happening. Every day he's going in and buying the pastries. So his friend, this beautiful spiritual teacher, says to him, well, why don't you leave your wallet at home? And the guy says to him, what, you mean I should steal them? And I love that story because the idea that the guy could actually not get the pastries was inconceivable. And so if he didn't have his wallet, the only other alternative must be he had to steal them. And this is how most of us operate. So it's a great question that you've asked. And really the answer is actually quite simple. Become conscious. Now, yes, so we're going to come there and then we're going to come into the actual habit. So how to become conscious. We learn being conscious in meditation. It's the easiest and best place to do it. So when I am meditating, lots of things happen. My knee itches, I want to scratch it. This ankle is hurting a little bit against the roughness of the mat. I want to move it. I'm thirsty, I want some water. My mind suddenly is thinking about this really difficult conversation at work I have to have later today. All of these things that are trying to pull my mind off of what I'm meditating on. But as I practice meditation, I simply notice them. I don't go with them. So before I develop this ability, it itches, I scratch it before I've even realized what I've done. It hurts, I move it before I realize what I've done. A thought comes, I go off on it. I have no idea where I started, where I end up. I mean, you're meditating and suddenly smell of coffee comes from your neighbors. And suddenly it's like, oh God, that coffee smells so good. I don't know why I gave up coffee to begin with. Anyway, the research now says it's a good thing to have. God, I remember those days I used to sit in Paris on the Champs-Élysées, drinking cappuccinos, watching people walk by. Those were such good days. Why did I give up that job offer? God, that would have been so good. I could be living in Paris now. Okay, right? A smell of coffee. And I'm now questioning the last 30 years of my life. Decisions. Like, how did I get there? But that's how the mind works. So the moment we're actually conscious, which is just a practice, but as I sit to meditate, I smell the coffee and I simply note smells, and I'm back to my breath. Later on, the more and more you meditate, you don't actually have to name it, you just simply draw the awareness back, but it helps in the beginning to note what you are noticing. Don't tell a story about it, don't judge it, don't analyze it, no adjectives, no adverbs, no stories, just smelling. That's it. That's all that's happened. Smelling. I'm back to my breath. I'm back to a mantra. Itching. Back to my breath. Back to my mantra. And slowly, slowly you develop a skill of being conscious, being present. Now in that moment, the consciousness is simply that I am smelling something, that I am itching, and now that I am aware of my breathing. But once you find relief from the distractions, which happens relatively quickly, just not immediately, then that consciousness starts to actually expand. And then you start being able to have a consciousness that is far beyond what the senses are experiencing or where the thought might be going. But it begins by simply being aware. You notice it. You realize that you are separate from it because you're the one who's watching. I'm the one who notices I'm itching, which means I'm not the itch. I don't have to scratch it. I've got a choice. I've just noticed it. And that technique and ability stays with you the rest of the day. So you find that you are, as I said, in control of the hands, the feet, the tongue, because you're aware, you're conscious of what you're reaching toward, what you're grabbing for, what you're pushing away. You start to notice it. Grabbing. Whether it's for a gulab jamun, whether it's for appreciation from the boss, whether it's for anything. What are you grabbing for? What are you longing for? What are you pushing away? That sense of aversion, we just become aware of it. We don't have to act on it. We just become aware. And so that's when you gain this conscious control over your life. But going back to your specific example about getting out of bed in the morning, any of these types of habits, they take a while. This is why I began by saying the brain functions on autopilot. It's just a habit. It's a groove, literally. Neurologically, we say a neural network. in India we talk about sanskaras, grooves in our psyche. This is how we do things. This is how I react. And in order to change it, all you have to do is commit to changing it and then stick with it for a few weeks. And you'll lay brand new networks, brand new patterns, brand new grooves. But it takes usually at least a few weeks, in some cases a couple of months. But we're not talking decades. Short period of time, just commit. And if you find that you're hitting the snooze button, you can do what I used to do in college, which was put my alarm clock at the opposite end of the room so that you can't actually hit it from bed. You've got to get up. You've got to walk across the room in order to turn it off. Once you're up, you're up. Then you just need a little bit of willpower not to actually crawl back under the covers. But the snooze button happens kind of while we're still asleep. We're not even aware of it until we wake up hours later and realize, oh my God, I hit the snooze button. I never got up. So just stick your alarm on the other side of the room, as far away from your bed as possible. And make it as loud as you can so that you can't sleep through it. The other thing that you can do that works is start giving yourself sort of rewards and punishments. So you don't get breakfast until you meditate. Missed getting up early? Okay, well, whatever time you did get up, if you don't meditate, you're not getting breakfast. And then be strict with yourself. Set up some of these little techniques. They're just techniques to keep you going for enough days in a row that it becomes its own habit, and slowly, slowly, slowly that'll become your new habit. Last piece about this is, one of the things that keeps a lot of us from getting up in the morning is we don't get to sleep on time at night. And so we're really tired. And no matter how many times we say, I'm going to develop a pattern of getting up early, each night when we get to bed much later than we had hoped, we say, well, not tomorrow because I really need to sleep. So day after tomorrow, I'll start getting up early. Tomorrow for sure I'll go to sleep on time. Never happens. Instead, make yourself get up. Nobody ever died from lack of sleep for one night. Get up on time, no matter how many hours of sleep you've had. Because what that means is you're going to get to sleep early that night. If you actually got up on time, even though you went to sleep late, you're going to be so tired that now you will sleep on time. And thus you will get into a good pattern. So make yourself get up regardless of what time you go to sleep. And just be strict with yourself for a couple of weeks. First it just takes willpower. And then it becomes its own habit. And it's how we change anything in our lives. But you can do it. And it's a beautiful question. And congratulations for having this vision and this goal at this young age. It's wonderful. Have a beautiful rest of your evening. A beautiful morning and day to our family joining us from all over the world. And I look so forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And as we mentioned on the Ghat, most of it was in Hindi tonight, but we're having this beautiful Ram Leela program that starts at 8 on the Ghat which is the story of the Ramayana. And don't worry if you don't speak Hindi, you'll still really love the kids doing their songs and dances. You must have seen them all dressed up in Aarti tonight. So it's a beautiful drama of the story of the Ramayana being put on by youth from across the country and also our Rishi Kumars. So that starts at 8, it goes till about 10, but for however much of it is you would like to be there, you're more than welcome and encouraged. And it's just to the left of where we have Aarti. So if you're facing Ganga from our Aarti Ghat, it's just to the left there. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So much love to you all.